against England. England just haven't been able to get to the highs of the first half. And there are gaps appearing now. And Conan's off to the races. Needs support. A little bit slow getting to him, but it is there now. Dan Sheehan. Great pass from the hooker to James Lowe. And Ireland are going to finish it right here. That's what the Ireland of old. Dan Sheehan puts a full stop on a terrific second half performance.
Brilliant way to win this game. Slade reads it wrong. He gets it all wrong, and it's Conan, the British and Irish Lion, who tears up the field. And I tell you what, no player deserved more to score this.
Struggling with some connection. I was trying some other, what's this thing called? Earphones. But now I'm on the road because I was doing some sound check in terms of the feed, if it's going to be clear. Because it sounds like I'm in a pub at the moment. But anyway, welcome everybody to another episode of the Rugby Scoop podcast. Yes, I'm joined by Jade Craig and Hugh Griffin. Vickers is on the road. I think he's traveling back to France, Russia, if I'm not mistaken.
He's in the air.
But as we
He's in the air right now as we speak.
Yeah, fair enough. It's quite a long trip because he has to connect a few times as well. But without wasting any time, guys, I usually start this with the news making headlines. Hugh, there was big news coming out, I think it was last week or in the beginning of this week, regarding TNT Sports, set to land the Six Nation deal, basically going forward, I think from 2026, if I'm not mistaken. Can you share a bit of light on that?
Yes, so for those not in the UK, the Six Nations is currently broadcasting a joint deal between the BBC and ITV, which are two free-to-air channels, or traditionally known as terrestrial channels, which means that everyone can watch them. But going to TNT would mean that it would be a subscription service, so people would have to pay to watch it. Now, the important thing is that Six Nations is kind of the only time of the year where casual, person on the streets is interested in rugby. It's not just the reserve of the hardcores, it's part of the general culture. It's, loads of people who are very casual rugby fans will go and see games, talk about it. It's very much a standout event in the rugby calendar. So I ran a poll on my Twitter a little while ago that said, what was your first, UK rugby fans, what was your first game that you ever watched? And something like 65% of people said that the first game that they ever watched was a Six Nations match on free-to-air television. So that's kind of the concern, is that the Six Nations is kind of the gateway into rugby for most fans in the UK. And by taking it away from free-to-air, that gateway would then be closed.
Yeah, fair enough. And Michael Cheika, Jade, set to leave his coaching role at Leicester. I mean, he just got there not so long ago. But also looking at the other news as well coming from France, that Stuart Lancaster will also be departing Racing Metro following a string of bad results in that regard. And then cities to host the Rugby World Cup 2027 have also been announced in Australia. There's been a string of rugby matches, Six Nations kicking off, Rugby Europe Championship also kicking off. Massive results for Georgia, 110 or 111 nil against Switzerland. So massive statement there by Georgia in the Rugby Europe Championship. But going into our topics of discussion, we're going to cover the Six Nations, starting off with Wales, Hugh, against France over on Friday night. Different year, same old Gats.
Definitely. That's the perfect way to describe it. 43-0, it is as much as you need to know about this game, really. There's, what do you even say? Passenger performance, really, from pretty much every player on the pitch, apart from one or two. A lot of people talking about the players working hard and things, and I'm like, cool, you're representing your country. Are we really praising that at this stage? International elite level sports is praising the efforts. in a game that you've been nilled in. The French kind of got the job done, played the razzle-dazzle in the first half, and then were just in cruise control for the second half. Wales never looked like scoring. I could go into stats, but it's kind of not really worth it in a 43-0 defeat. You know, what are any stats going to tell you? The Wales actually had about 50% of the possession, 50% of the territory, more passes, more carries, didn't do anything with them at any point. And I was watching the For the Love of Rugby podcast with Ben Youngs and Dan Coles, and actually Ben Youngs did a really great explanation of like the frustration he felt watching Wales. It was just so like choreographed, so prescriptive. It was like a 1-3-3-1, and then there'd be a carry, and then there'd be a pod with an arrowhead. It would go to that, and then they'd do that again, and they'd start on one side of the pitch, work their way to the other, and then come back again. And there was no variation, there was no individuality. It was so like everyone just like following the script. It's just very difficult to watch, and some of the defense at some moments, you know, there's a bit of a kind of a mystique around France and some of their players at the moment where if they do something like there's nothing you could have possibly done to have stopped it. I don't buy that. There was some very poor, just kind of, don't know how to describe it, just like uh, abstination in defense. Just like go, oh, someone else will problem. As long as I follow the defensive system, no one will be mad at me, kind of thing. So there's not tons to say about it, mate. It was a total humiliation for Wales.
Sounding like a very deflated Welsh fan there, Hugh. Jade, how are things in Bloom?
All good, all good. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, all good. I agree with with you on this. I mean, I watched the game on Friday night and I checked the stats. You know, I'm looking at. You mentioned that Wales had about 50% ball position, but could do nothing with it. But I mean, they lost by 40 points. Ball carries. Wales had more ball carries than France. Wales had 158 ball carries to France's 143. Post contact meters. Wales had more post contact meters than France. France had 8 line breaks, Wales had 5. Now you're telling me that team still copped 40 points and didn't score one. So it just shows you the state and where Welsh rugby is at the moment. I mean, I can maybe think of Jack Morgan and they scrummed right. That's the only positive that you take from that game. But I mean, I feel like a French way in second or third whole game. And I think I would have pulled the plug long time on Gets, but I don't know how they're going to turn this around. I don't know. I don't think they're going to get a victory of the Six Nations. If I'm looking at the way they're attacking shape, they're poor. Defensively, very, very poor. I mean, look at the try that I think it was the third try the French right winger scored where Dupont broke through. You look at the lock standing, at the ruck, standing guard at the ruck and just allowing him to pass by like that. I mean, that's poor defense. Every time Ramos had the ball, it felt like he had, acres of time on his hands. There was no rush into him. Wales, when they attacked, ran out of ideas. Sometimes they kick the ball away, put a few phases up and then grab a kick or try some up and under, from the base of the scrum. So I don't know. I think it's maybe just pull the plug on Gets and just continue to lose with a new coach, then continue in this matter with Wales. I don't think it's going to get any better soon.
Guys, as you just heard as well, we're reporting live from a sports pub at this point. But Hugh, Jade talks about grabbers and chips. You've also kind of shared a few clips on your timeline regarding the innovation, for lack of a better word, I guess, in what Wales were trying to do, trying to catch France off guard. Behind their first line of defense in that aspect. But what do you make of this current game plan? Let's not talk about the defensive efforts. The defensive efforts were there for the first 10 to 15 minutes, and then as soon as the longer the game wore on, the more Wales were basically falling off tackles. But from what I've seen with regards to how they are trying to probably change the style of play with those chips, obviously over the first line of defense, turning the French around. They did well for the first quarter of the game. Let's not I mean, it's not all doom and gloom for that first 20 minutes. The score was kind of 0-0, and then the French obviously kind of found ways to kind of break through that massive defense. But I mean, slowly but surely, we can see a few aspects where the defensive lines are there and thereabout, but obviously the immaturity then needs to come in, right, from the Welsh seniors as well, or the maturity from experienced players is also still lacking, because Gats is still adamant on building a young team and obviously building for 2027. But I mean, what do you make of the game plan that you saw on the field? Is it still working? Obviously, yeah, you've already alluded to the fact that it's not. But I mean, do you see promise, or do you see light at the end of the tunnel when you start looking at that first 20 minutes of the game? And probably the last 60 was probably in disarray for Wales.
No, I don't see any promise at all. It's getting worse. If you look at the score lines of the last 3-4 games, each one is worse than the last in terms of the losing deficits. Yeah, cool. We kept them out for 17 minutes. Like, I had people messaging me, like, when France scored their first try, like, 17 minutes, that wasn't so bad. You know, that what about when we score? When does that happen? You know, it's like France were just like kind of warming up in that first 17 minutes. They were getting themselves kind of excited. I think Dupont was held up once. Great effort by Tom Rogers to hold him up. Yeah, so I'm not getting excited over 17 minutes of not conceding when you go on to concede 43 unanswered. It was like, yeah, it's getting worse. Everything is getting worse.
What do you make of what's at number 14 again? There's a young player playing 14 on the wing for the Welsh team. I think he was quite
Tom Rogers.
impressive. I mean, anyone from your perspective that you think has a bright future with this current team at the moment?
Yeah, Tom Rogers is playing really well. He's played really well all season for the Scarlets, and he's very good in the air. I think his future's as a fullback, and he's got great footwork as well. He's one of those players who goes forward through agility rather than size. He burst onto the scene a few years ago, and his career kind of stalled a bit. He had a couple of injuries. He was in and out of the Scarlets team. Wasn't really showing the promise that we'd seen early on. But this season, he's been fantastic. So that's great to see. I thought Henry Thomas did well at the scrum. Really anchored it. Scrum was a huge problem at the end of last year, and I thought he's statistically the best tight head in Wales, based on regional form this season, and I think he transferred that. Look, he's 30 plus years old. He's scrummaged in the top 14. You would expect him to be able to do a job, and he did that job. Jack Morgan is obviously very, very good as well. And I think in attack, I can't really think of anything else, to be honest. Trying to go through. I liked Evan Lloyd, the young hooker who started. I thought his footwork was very good. His agility before contact I really liked. But apart from that, can't really think of anything else.
Fair. But we're not going to move on until we talk about the French side as well, Jade. I mean, the French side, from what I've seen on Saturday or Friday night, rather, still going about their processes, right? I mean, they capitalized on the Welsh mistakes in those first 3 or 4 tries in the beginning of the game. But after that, obviously, once the scoreline and the gap has been created, and obviously the Welsh team not having the right experience, couldn't hold them for long enough. But I mean, what do you make of this French side? Do you still see them going all the way after making your predictions last week?
Well, if you look at the squad, I mean, the team that was selected, there was areas that I felt the French were weak in. I mean, if you look at who they had up front, I mean, they started with Romat and Maifu as a lock pairing. So you're looking at Wales it was opportunity for them, to target them at line-out time and in the aerial game, but they really didn't do that. I mean, if you're going to play against England and Ireland or even Scotland, and they're going to play with that, with Romat at 4, and you're going to looking at these loose fools, or you can really target them at line-out time. However, they did okay. The thing is, for me, for the French team the weekend, they sniff opportunities and they take their off chances. That's what makes them dangerous. I mean, we've always spoken about in the years of the French teams, they can turn up on the day and they can beat absolutely everybody and then they can lose against anybody. But this team seems like taking these off chances. And I mean, if you look at the wingers, what's the guy's name? Penu didn't even play the weekend, but this is Beret and the other winger on the right winger, Adesope. Those guys are finishers. They're out and out finishers. I mean, even if you look at Thomas Ramos at 15, he's not the most, how can I say, attacking wise with ball in hand. I mean, he's very tactical and technical. He's good. He's a world class player. But I mean, he's not your, let's say, a Ben Smith or somebody in that caliber, or I'm just looking for name dropping. Maybe it's the Vali LaRue or somebody like that. It's very attacking. He's more technical. Gets drives the team forward in certain areas. But the wingers are impressive. Impressive. They sniff off opportunities. We've seen it week in, week out. In the top 14, we see it. In the Challenge Cup and the Champions Cup, we've seen it. So that's a strength with him. With this French team, you give them an off chance and they put the game away. I mean, we've seen it in a test against New Zealand. They should have lost the game, but the wingers won them the game at the end of the day. There's a lot of things that France gets to look at. I think at scrum time, there's a lot of work needs to go in there. Honestly, I know I might get criticized for this, but I think Antonio is past his sell-by date now. I think they need to move on from him. Muvaka's a brilliant hooker, but is it the best scrummager in the world? I don't think so. So I think teams can target them in scrum time, and the French teams can also get better at that, especially at scrum time. But if you look at Scoop, last week we spoke about what Toulouse and who was the other team the Sharks played? But with Bordeaux, what their props did against Ox and Koch, they kind of dominated them, but you want the same dominance from the French team, but we're not getting that from their props, So that's something that if I was out there, I'd look at, to move forward, because with this pack, they should be dominating the Six Nations and they're really stamping the authority down, because there's no team in the Six Nations that has stronger scrummagers or have a more bigger size and stronger pack than what the French do. So they can work on that. But other than that, I think if I was out there, I'll give it a 5 or 6, maybe a 6 out of 7 performance. I wouldn't really top it up and say it was a great performance, because they played against a weak Welsh team.
Yeah, fair enough. Hugh, your thoughts on the French side, and Antoine Dupont as well, as how influential he still is. I mean, last season we didn't see him play in the Six Nations, but he's back now and is leading that team from the front.
Yeah, he made a few mistakes early on. He kicked a ball to no one, to the touchline, and yeah, generally I think he tried a few things that didn't come off. But obviously he's got that moment of magic in him still. His kick pass is phenomenal, and his ability to just snap the gap. I think his pace is really underrated, and it's just speed of thoughts. Like, he gets tries for seeing something first, and then catching players off guard, because he arrives on the scene much quicker than you might expect. But he's just got an aura about him at the moment, that every time he does something, it's like everyone goes, oh, well, no one could ever have done anything to stop him from doing that. And I don't agree with that. Yes, he does amazing things, but I think players on pitches are now starting to buy into, like, well, there's nothing we can do, so they don't try. So, yeah, so that's a bit of a frustration. But has Dupont been France's best player in any of France's last few test matches? I think Thomas Ramos has been performing better than him so far this season, but he's still great.
Oops, lost my connection there for a second. Yeah, and that's about it for this particular one between France and Wales. Jade, looking into Ireland and England, what a humdinger, man. What a very good game that was yesterday. But any highlights for you that stood out in that particular game?
I think after the game yesterday, the Irish really have to appreciate New Zealand school rugby and development, because I think the 3 New Zealand boys was absolutely brilliant for them yesterday. I think Jonathan Kitson-Park, Lowe and Bandi Aki were brilliant, especially James Lowe. What, he got 3 tries yesterday? He was brilliant yesterday. I think England, the first half, they had good shape in attack. They kept Ireland guessing. I mean, we saw Marcus Smith get the short pass going. You got a short running game going. You got a kicking game going. So I thought really, they looked okay. And then second half, after that yellow card, I think it was to Marcus Smith. That's just where the game, just swung a little bit going into halftime. Ireland scored from there. And although England had the lead at halftime, but Ireland came out better. And the bench, I mean, you're looking at Ireland there, about 500 plus caps on their bench compared to England, who had about 80 or so. That was just at the end of the day, the telling point in this game yesterday. England, would you say a positive performance? Because Ireland, the second half, they were really poor. Ireland ran away with it and then England scored 2 tries at the end. I don't know if you could say it's a positive performance because, I don't know, we looking at this England team last week, and you, especially Scoop, you said, England might just win Ireland in Ireland, but I don't know if they'll be too satisfied with that performance yesterday because we're looking at the way the game went, especially in the second half. But from an Ireland perspective, I think the backline was decent and solid yesterday. The guy at 10 Prendergast, he was okay. He's going to make mistakes. He's going to have this go flat at times, going to struggle at times, but that's what you get when you're choosing a younger player. But up front, I mean, the guys that can put up their hand, and Kenneth Byrne, when Sheehan came on as well, they were brilliant, So for me, I would think that's Ireland's best performance since beating the Box in Durban last year. I would think that's Ireland's best performance in a while. Although I still think there's a lot of room for improvement for them, especially if they're going to have to beat France.
Yeah, Hugh, your thoughts?
Yeah, the Scoop. I'm so bored of everyone going into so much length and detail and trying to explain why this England team is actually really good and we just don't understand. Like I'm looking at the stat. I've just been doing the stats while we've been talking. England's ruck speed, the slowest. The only team with less than 50% of rucks less than 3 seconds at 42%. Like passes, England's the fewest of anybody. Offloads, England's the fewest of anybody. So they're not an exciting team, despite everyone trying to convince us that they are. And the defence. I am so over this will they, won't they, hokey cokey mystery box of a defence that is England's defence at the moment. Like everybody's trying to explain why it's so good. Guys, 3 tries against the All Blacks, 5 tries against Australia, 4 tries against the Springboks, 4 tries against Ireland. Conceded. If the point of a defence is to stop the opposition from scoring, then by that most basic definition, England's defence is a shambles. Let's talk about their halfbacks. The halfbacks' defence for England is not up to test level. You go back over the last few games that England have played and see where they're conceding their tries. They're conceding their tries on the wings, and who's defending on the wings is the halfbacks. Why are the halfbacks defending on the wing? Is it because they're amazing defenders, or is it because they're being protected? All I can tell you is James Lowe running at Alex Mitchell, smashes through him, glass through hammer. Bundyaki moved over to the wing, running at Marcus Smith and Alex Mitchell, smashes through both of them like a hammer through glass. How is this a good defense? Why are people so convinced that this defense is good? I don't understand it. I think England's defense should be sponsored by DHL, world-class shipping points.
DHL England, DHL Borthwick, DHL Maro Itoji. Jade, looking at the forward packs from yesterday, I mean, it was quite well-known guys that were playing in the front rows for both teams. What are your thoughts regarding the forwards and the scrums during that game as well?
Yeah, I still think both teams are not very strong scrummages. Technique-wise, for me, if you're looking at Porter, so much wrong with the I see him, scrummaging, his elbow especially, and Finley Beelum as well. I mean, they're not the best scrummages in the world. Although I do feel a guy like when he came on like Danchi and stabilized him, but for me, I don't know how you feel about this. You especially, I mean, you watch him quite a bit in European competition, but I expect a little bit more from Genge at scrum time, a little bit more aggression, a little chancing his luck at times, and he's just not doing it anymore. Yes, it's brilliant carrying the ball, he's getting around the park, but I think that's an aspect in his game that he can improve, especially at scrummaging time, especially with his physique and his dominance on the field, because that's what you want. That's why I can't rate him as a world class loser. He doesn't dominate at scrum time. So, like I said, both teams' scrums is relatively mild. I'm not really going to hype it up. I think it was a fair contest at the end of the day. I would say that Ireland did also get the upper hand at times. But for me, I still expect a little more from Ginge, especially with Itoji and those guys at the back, and Martin and all those guys at the back behind him. I think he's got a good platform, to strike and attack from and to be a little bit more aggressive. The other thing that I did see of yesterday from Ireland, and speaking of the backs, I think it was one of the few games that Doris, the captain, was relatively quiet. I think he had one of his quiet games. I mean, he's always been the one, carrying me going forward and stuff. So I think he was relatively quiet yesterday. I wouldn't really, I don't think he'll be happy with his performance. But like I say, I think yesterday the Irish backline was, they took a shine yesterday. I mean, the lines they ran and the half gaps they got through, the line breaks they got. So I think that took a telling point at the end of the day. But yeah, as far as the packs, I wouldn't write the home about both scrums at the moment, Scoop. I don't know, maybe I'm being a little bit harsh here, but I wouldn't do it.
Yeah. Oh, Hugh, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, it was unusual to see Ireland get kind of the nudge at the scrum time. That's not something we've seen a lot. Porter, there's been questions over his scrummaging, the legality of his scrummaging. Sometimes it comes off, sometimes it doesn't. There was a big worry about tight head as well, with Tyke Furlong going down injured not long before the team was announced. So that was something that Ireland fans were worried about. But it all seemed to go fine. And surprised that the bench was impactful as it was. Yes, it's experienced, but it is probably the wrong side of 30 across the board, and it was a real problem in the autumn. So for England to get undone by that was quite concerning, although Dan Sheehan is a world-class player. I'm such a huge fan of him. I think he's probably the best hooker in the world at the moment. So it's great to see him back from injury, and what an impact he had on the game.
Jade, I think obviously this is Maro Itoje's first game as a captain for English side, right? I mean, what did you think of him in terms of presence? Because I saw him quite a lot, probably in Ben O'Keefe's face a few times, and I think at one point Ben O'Keefe had to say, "Hey, listen, not every single time I blow my whistle, you need to come to me and have a chat," But what did you think of his presence on the field and also leadership regarding the game?
He was, like I say, he was. We saw him around the park. We saw his presence around the park. I mean, we saw him during the mall defenses. The Mari Toji getting up there, getting stuck in. He was on the ball a lot. I think the first half, like with the old English team, he was there. He was okay. I liked his leadership. I liked the way he spoke to Ben O'Keefe. Sometimes guys, when they're doing this for the first time international level, they shy away in getting their communication with Ben O'Keefe. I mean, we see also with that try that. He tried to get disallowed, for the foul tackle on him. You saw that we tried to get a team out review, but you saw him being vocal with Ben O'Keefe, and that's what you want. You sometimes you see. I mean, you always go back. Like for example, if you look in a scenario of where Jamie George is not playing here, so Mario Stoge is taken over. But you look at, if I can give you plain examples, a few years ago or a decade ago when John Smith got injured and Victor Matwood to go international level, a lot of referees saying that, John Smith had a better relationship in talking to the referees than what Victor Matwood had in that short stint, because the Box lost a few games there. So there's still a relationship in the way you conduct yourself on the field that, as a captain at international level. So yeah, I think it went okay, Scoop. I expect a lot more from Maritoji as a player. I think he regressed a little bit in the past few years, but his captaincy on the day was okay. I mean, he's experienced enough, he knows how to handle referees and stuff. And you've seen him around the park. That's what you want to see from your captain, You see him around the park carrying ball, being at malls, making tackles. So yeah, I think at the end of the day he was okay. But we'll see how the progress of the Six Nations. I think it's unfair to look at his captaincy now and making a decision or determining how it's going. Let's see over a few games how his captaincy is, what kind of a person he is on the field, especially that relationship with referees, And he's also a very let's say this chirpy banter guy, always cheering the guys up off the ball or so. Let's see how that also appears. I mean, now with him being, captain for a few games or so, how does that happen? But in terms of, the big question being asked, sorry I missed this. I mean, there's a lot of questions being asked, from the north. Is he a contended to be one of the Lions captains? I don't think so. I think he's in contention, but I don't think I don't think he'll get that role. And from Saturday's performance also, I really don't think Farrell will really turn to him to be captain of the Lions.
Tough one. Big one, big one, big one. Hugh, Ireland is currently divided, right, between the first 5-8 position, number 10, between Teddy Pendergrast. Oh, not Teddy. Teddy Pendergrast is a singer. Sam. Sam Pendergrast and Crowley. Obviously, there was big talk about the selection, who would start at 10, but what do you think of Sam's performance, and then what do you think of how Crowley handled himself coming off the bench from Saturday?
I feel like Sam is being chucked in a little bit too early. So Sam is the chosen one in Ireland. He has been tipped for great things from a very long age. I spoke to a coach who coached him at under 18s level, and he said that after the first training session, he had people coming down to see him to ask, what's the story with this guy, how good he is he, etc., etc. And I feel like he's just a touch too early being thrown in. I found him in the first half against England a little bit casual. He was taking the ball standing still a lot. Now, his passes were very good. He's got a great pass on him, very fast hands. And he did manage to, run a couple of nice loops and exploit some gaps and things. I think it's a wider point about Ireland. They're lacking pace in that back line. They need to get a speedster or two in there because I think that's a weakness in their attack. But I think Sam struggled to really get a hold of the game. And I think when Crowley came on, and look, I think there's a lot of examples that we could all think of the halfback who comes on making a big difference. But I do think that Jack did make that difference. And if you look at their kick meters, for example, Jack Crowley kicked a lot longer. He was kicking like 10, 11 meters longer than Sam was. And maybe that was a tactical thing that he'd gone on with the intent to do that. But you have to say that Ireland started looking a lot more flash with Jack on the pitch. So I still think that Sam Prendergast's ceiling might be higher than Jack Crowley's ultimately. But for me, Jack Crowley is today, as we stand now, the better 10 for Ireland as in terms of how close he is to his ceiling.
No, fair. Jade, you've spoken quite a lot about Sam Pendergrast. I mean, what do you think of his performance Saturday then? I mean, do you think he starts again next weekend, or will they go? Crowley has actually shown his maturity and experience in that late second half performance, and now he deserves to start the following weekend. But what do you think of Sam, and obviously, how do you think Jack maybe establishes himself into that 10 jersey?
I think with Sam Prendergast, his seeding is higher than Jack Crowley's. I think he's the real deal. I think he'll be turned out to be a world class player in a few years' time. He's not now. I think maybe Crowley's a better 10 as than him now. But I think it's more picking the guy on potential than actual form or actual current ability at the moment. That's what I'm trying to say. For me, I mean, I always revert back to a Dan Carter situation when he came on the scene for New Zealand. He wasn't the best flower for New Zealand at the moment, but he grew into the role. And the same can be said now with the box. When you're looking at a guy like Sasha, he may be Andre Pollard or Mani Lebok still better than in certain aspects, but in 2-3 years' time, he will be the undisputed number one if he stays fit. So I think it's similar with Sam Prendergast. I think it's similar. I seen him 2 years ago for the first time when the junior box played in that. I think it was that summer or junior championship there, 2021 there, and I think Sasha also played that year, and he really caught the eye. He was brilliant that time. So I was watched him a few times. I've seen him last year and a few years playing in the IFL when he came down with Leinster. He wasn't special or not really had his better games or so, but I've been watching and monitoring his development, and I can understand why they're putting him in. I can understand why they're getting some youth in there. But I mean, Crowley's not a bad fly off as well. I mean, it was just last year, so we scored a winning drop goal for Monster against Leinster in the semi-final, and I mean, he's bailed in Ireland out a few times or so. So I guess at the moment, it's giving Predators the chance, and then Crowley would be more the insurance from the bench, to seal off the game. But in terms of ability and potential, I think Predators with his ability and potential, and his ceiling is much higher than Crowley.
Oh, fair, fair. Looking at Ollie Lawrence, Hugh, and how England are using him, do you think they're using him to his full potential? I mean, I saw him have like one or two busting runs from first receiver, but that was only used inside their own 22. And then you look at a guy like Stewart at the back as well. Maybe he could be used as a first receiver offset piece, right? I mean, these are two big guys, but I don't think England are using them to the full effect or to their full potential at this point. I mean, do you think a guy like Ollie Lawrence could play a role like what Bandi Aki is doing for Ireland?
I think centre is a massive problem for England. If you look in England's squad, every centre that they've got in there is a 13. They play 13 at club level. And Ollie Lawrence had played 13 for England for a bit because he is closest, as you say, to that crash ball option. But it just wasn't working. And he was getting, to be honest, manhandled at times trying to play that role. So despite his physique, he is better in space. But it just means that England are lacking this. And if you read any English publication, Charlie Morgan is a great writer who's written about this a lot. Of England are lacking that option ever since Tuolagi went. And if you look around the Premiership, there's a lot of the centres, a lot of the number 12s in the Prem are foreign. They're Fijian or South African or what have you. So it's a problem position for England. Um, could they just try and force turning Ollie Lawrence into that player? I feel like they tried and it didn't work. Honestly. But you are right. They are missing some bulk in that backline.
Yeah, Jade, jump in there.
No, man. The problem with Ollie Lawrence is you're putting him at center at 12. And I mean, there's certain games, I think it was against the Box and against New Zealand last year, where he touched the ball twice or thrice whole game. So you're not really playing to his strength, and you're not really giving him that, that platform to run from, or that platform to, to build his game at 12. So I agree with you. There's so many of those 12s, actually 13s, they need an out and out number 12. But I mean, that's what England's been doing this past few years. And when Tuolangi's not been playing, they've been shifting Owen Farrell to 12 at times, and getting the Ford Farrell combination there. So I think it's in terms of England, that was a development issue. I'm not sure. We'll have to see in the junior ranks who is coming through at 12. But I mean, you can't have a guy like Ollie Lawrence there playing in the 12 where he touches the ball twice or thrice whole game. I mean, that's unacceptable.
Nah, fair enough. Hugh, there's been a few tweets from Friday's game about a certain element that took place regarding the French team, and I've seen that obviously the trend has now kind of stuck from last season to this season. A lot of the teams now are going 6-2 splits to basically have that reinforcement of running in 6 reserves coming on at the same time, similar to what Rassie Rasmus has done with the Springboks. Do you think now this is the way that rugby is going? This is the way forward for rugby in terms of 6-2 splits, 7-1 splits. Maybe sometimes we'll go 8-0 at some point.
Yeah, I definitely think that the 6-2 split is suiting most teams, and it's suiting how rugby is at the moment. And, I've always said, I think I've said it on this pod in the past, having a winger on the bench, what does that achieve? What's a winger supposed to do to change a game? If you're talking 2015 All Blacks where you've got Bowden Barrett and Sonny Bill Williams on the bench, that's a different story. That's a very different story. And I think if you're going to have a 12 or at least a centre on the bench, or maybe even a utility back, someone razzle dazzle on the bench, that could make an impact. But if you're just going to change a winger over, that's not affecting a game as much as bringing on an extra back row for me. So I'm not surprised to see the 6-2 be more popular. I think 4 out of the 6 nations went for it. And like I said, I think it suits the talent pool that most have. I think that certainly England suit a 6-2. If you look at Ireland in the past, when they've gone 5-3, they've had Stuart McCluskey on the bench, who's another big inside centre to make an impact that way. So I definitely, at the moment, in where rugby is today, I see the 6-2 as, for most teams, being the superior option.
Jade, down under in New Zealand and Australia, they still stuck with 5-3. I mean, do you see them also maybe changing their approach going forward? Because I think Scott Robertson has been asked a few times as well regarding this particular aspect, and he's basically stuck with his guns in terms of still managing and keeping the 5-3 original split on the bench.
Depends on your options. If you're looking at the guys that's using the 6-3, I mean the 6-2, you're looking at the box and now recently France as well. You know DuPont is going to play 80 minutes. There's no way, unless they're leading by 50 points or 40 points or so, they're pulling it. But if the game's tight and close, he wants DuPont on the field. So, I mean, DuPont can play fly-off as well. He can play there comfortably as well. And then you've got Ramos as well that can play fly-off. So they've got enough cover, in terms of the fly-off. So they don't need to have a fly-off on the bench. So looking at the options, who do they want to the bench? Who do they have? The same with the box, the box have a lot of utility players. I mean, from the bench, like your Damien Williams says, those guys, they can cover multiple positions in the back line. Same with Sasha. So looking at who you have, do you have that utility player? Because you're looking at New Zealand, looking at Bowden Barrett maybe being that utility player that can cover, and then Geordie Barrett. But then who covers at centre? How are you gonna handle that situation? Who's gonna play there? The same with Australia. You're gonna look at who's available. Some guys, some teams just feel, that they have the extra back is more of insurance, because they don't have that utility players. Some people are just stubborn. Don't like the way the game is playing and believe in their philosophies. So yeah, for me, I would just see who's available to me. What do I have in my squad? Who can be that utility player? Because I agree with you. There's no way having a guy like Mark Delia on the bench to replace a Caleb Clark, for example. It just does not make sense.
Mark Tillier copping strays.
Max Delia catching hands even when he hasn't even played.
Just warming up for the season. I'm just warming up for the season.
Fair enough. Yeah, by the way, Super Rugby kicks off, or Super Rugby Pacific kicks off in 2 weeks' time. Proper footy. The Italian-Scotland game, did you get to watch it, and Jade?
Yeah, watched all of them.
All the footy. Yeah, I mean, any highlights from your side from that particular element? I think Scotland probably showed a bit of grit going forward into that particular game, because I don't know, man, what next for Italy now? Because sometimes they're thereabout, but it's always like they're always short or come off short in terms of getting over the line, in terms of getting the results they want. I mean, the best result they've had so far is a draw against France, and they missed an easy kick, right? Where to now? Because you would think a Scottish game, a game against maybe Wales now, would be those games that they would target in this particular competition.
I think Italy weren't bad. I've certainly seen worse Italys. They obviously started very slowly, and they're not getting the ball into the hands of their best players enough. They're not getting Garbisi, Capozzo, Menoncello on the ball enough. I thought that Brex in the centre for the first hour of that game was 10 out of 10. I thought he was brilliant. With his interception, with his defensive reads, with his even counter-rucking, things like that. It was absolutely sensational. But I feel like the game was less close than it seems. When it got back to 19 all, that was a bit of an anomaly. Because if you look at what Scotland had, they had 3 tries. And if you look at what Italy had, they had 4 penalty kicks, very well taken kicks by Tommaso Allen, and an intercept that went under the post. So it was kind of a false reading of the game. And in the end, Scotland have gone and scored another, 2 or 3 tries on top of that to make the game safe. I really backed Scotland. A lot of people were criticising Scotland not going for the 3. I really back it. I really back them going for touch from every penalty and then getting the tries. And look, if you look at from Italy's point of view, they kicked 3 penalties, great. Or 4 penalties. If from those 4 penalties they had kicked into Scotland's 22 each time, and maybe come away with 1 or 2 tries, it's a different game. So yes, it was 19 all for a minute, but that is kind of like risk reward. You're not going to win games in 2025 by kicking the 3 at that kind of level, in my opinion. So, yeah, I thought on the opposite to Italy, Scotland got the ball in the hands of the best players a lot more. Finn Russell, Blair Kinghorn got loads of touches. Duhan van der Merwe, Darcy Graham, plenty of touches. So that was a good step for Scotland. They getting the ball to the danger men more often spelled trouble. And then Hugh Jones obviously getting the hat trick. He's looking pretty nailed on for going on the plane to Australia in the summer.
Yeah, that was what I was going to touch on now, Jade, regarding obviously we know that Tui Polotu is out and obviously Hugh Jones now scoring a hat trick over the weekend. I mean, what are your thoughts regarding them missing the Tui Polotu guy and then obviously Hugh Jones performing?
No, I didn't. Somebody had a thread in the week when Tupelotu got injured. What is Gregor Townsend going to do? I mean, obviously the Jones and Tupelotu combination for the Warriors and for Scotland has been perfect. I mean, they really put their hand up there as being one of the best centre pairings in the world at the moment in current form. But I think Hugh Jones is coming of age a little bit, and maybe staying in the corner to being world class. I think he was brilliant yesterday. I think he was absolutely brilliant. But the guy that he placed, Tupelotu yesterday, what's this guy's name now? The 12 that he replaced, McDowell. He plays in a similar role and does a similar job, at the club level. So for me, I feel, it was an easy transition. He's not as good as Tupelotu. I mean, come on, Tupelotu is one of the better 12s in world rugby at the moment. But I think, he could do that role. He could play the Tupelotu role because he was familiar in doing it and, it just suited the game. I think yesterday, I think the winners was brilliant, especially Darcy Graham for Scotland. He was brilliant yesterday and Duan as well. But yeah, looking at this Italy team, they're down by, you get the scores back, you get back into the game, and then you can see the try like that where Scotland scores from the own half, on 22, break through weak defense and go and score. That's a killing moment in the game. Then you get a penalty advantage. So you're chasing the game, you're putting so much pressure on Scotland. You get a penalty advantage on their line, and you get a free play. And you decide to pick up and go the whole time, and eventually lose up the ball. Instead of just chancing at the back, just chancing, just throwing the ball out wide or trying a cross kick or trying something, because you got the free play already. So those are the things that Italy needs to work on if they want to seal out games and if they want to win games, of this caliber. So yeah, for me, as far as Tupelotu and Hugh Jones, yeah, obviously the combination was messed up, but I think the guy McDowell yesterday, stepped into the Tupelotu role well, and I think Hugh Jones has been absolutely brilliant, in the past few seasons now for Warriors and for Scotland.
Yeah. Okay, Hugh, regarding Scotland, I mean, do you think they stand within a chance this season? Or is it going to be the same old Scotland, almost a similar story to what Italy is doing, right? But regarding a proper go and a proper chance of them actually clinching this title, I mean, is it possible without Tui Polotu? Is it possible at this point, looking at their squad and looking at their team? I mean, they don't have a lot of injuries besides the captain. They've kept the same squad now for the past 4 to 5 years, roughly. I mean, what are the chances? Because, I mean, every year and every season, we always say Scotland is the dark horse, but they never really pull through.
Yeah, Scotland's no excuses for them. They've got the talents, they've got the cohesion, they've got the experience. There's nothing really stopping them apart from same old Scotland. And will it be the same old Scotland? Yes, it will, because it always is. That's why we say same old Scotland. They've got Ireland at home next week. If they don't win that, then we can all go home. Basically, it's just going to be another. It's going to be another season of the sameness. I don't think Ireland are at their peak currently, so it should be an opportunity for Scotland. But history tells us they don't turn up against Ireland. So if they win next week, then all bets are off. But what evidence do we have that they're going to win? I'm not sure.
Yeah. There's a question from Jan about Finn Russell. On and off, hot and cold. 1 week is good, the next week is bad, and it basically infiltrates into the team. Maybe Jade, both of you can answer this. Hugh, but you can go first. I mean, your thoughts on Finn Russell and how he needs to also lead from the front and take this
Yeah,
team forward.
his intercept that he chucked yesterday was a particular shocker, but yeah, I do think he's good. I do think he's the best fly half in the Six Nations. To be fair to him, he does blow hot and cold, and sometimes his head dips, and he doesn't. It's not give up, but he kind of goes, "Oh well, I'm going to need to work a miracle here," and he tries to work a miracle, and it doesn't work. So I still think that he's the best in the Six Nations, like I said, as a 10. But just if he plays badly, his team will lose, basically.
Yeah, that's the thing. Jade, your thoughts on him?
You see, Scoop, with these kind of players, I mean, your Finn Russells, I mean, I don't know if you can put it, your Dane McKenzie as well. Back in the day, we had, Carlos Spence and all of those guys. You're always going to get questions in terms of consistency. You can do the brilliant things good, but can you do the simple things good 10 out of 10 times? Because you're going to be criticized when that 3 or 4 times you didn't do the simple thing good, or you went for something flashy, or you did, something out of the extraordinary. And that's where the problem with these kind of players comes through in terms of consistency and doing a simple thing. I think, he's still the best fly-off in Scotland. Definitely one of the best fly-offs in the Northern Hemisphere. I think, with a guy like, Tom Jordan behind him and also Fergus Berg there as well, coming through now, I think maybe those guys can also push him and, lift up his game, because that's what he might need, because they're playing good rugby as well. But yeah, with a guy like that, with a flashy thing, a thing that's shows a lot of flair, that's very versatile, that's, like an attacking game. So you're always going to be criticized, always going to have a spotlight on you for that one mistake that you do make. And it could be costly. And they tend to come, these number 10s. We've seen it all over the years,
Yeah, fair enough. Jade brings another point. Actually, we were supposed to talk about this, I think, a couple of weeks back regarding Fergus Burke, right? He's been brought into the squad as well. And then my question, I think, 2 weeks back was around the fact that a lot of the Southern Hemisphere players that qualify to play for either Ireland, Wales, or Scotland or England tend to actually make the squad or the team quite early, even if it's their first season, right? I mean, Fergus Berg has hardly played 180 minutes of rugby, but has already been selected to be in the squad because I guess at this point in time they don't have the depth either at 10 or 15. But what is it then about the Southern Hemisphere players? You look at James Lowe, you look at Gibson Park, I mean, took the jersey from Murray, these players kind of play for one season and they'll automatically make it into the team or the setup. What is it about the situation up here up north, or what is it about these players? Yes, they've got the talent, but I mean, what is your take on this particular aspect?
I think first thing to say is that if you look at countries like Ireland, Wales, and Scotland, first of all, small countries. Now, I know New Zealand isn't a particularly big country, but it's bigger than those three. There's a lot of history of immigration. I have to also remember, unfortunately, guys, we're talking about British colonies here that play rugby, apart from France. And there was a lot of immigration from countries like Wales, Ireland, and Scotland to those colonies for work reasons or whatever. So there's historicalness to it. That you won't find that many people in Scotland, Wales, or Ireland who aren't also somehow qualified for another country. You've got free movement between those countries and England, and so there's a political maybe not, but there's a strategic aspect to the selections of. With a guy who's like Fergus Burke, I think he qualifies for New Zealand, England, and Scotland. So there's an edge to it there of we need to get this guy into our squad first to capture him. So Wales have done this in the past where they'll cap someone who is not ready for international level just to make sure that they are captured moving forward and they can't play for anybody else. So that's just the way it is. Scotland in particular, you have to look, they've only got 2 pro sides. They're probably the biggest rugby nation with the fewest teams. So their pathway isn't that big. Now, I do think there is, in the case of Scotland specifically, a question to be had over their pathways, because well, I can't remember the guy's name, but there was that Aussie school kid playing in the Pro Day was called into the Scotland camp.
Wow.
Like,
Well, their academy is based in Bloemfontein, where Jade is sitting.
I think there is a question to be asked over Scotland's pathways. If you look at their under-20s team, not great. They were in the second tier of the under-20s championship. You know, they haven't been in the World Championship for a few seasons. They've been in the trophy beneath. So clearly Scotland's pathway, they had a Super 6 development tournament for a while. They've gotten rid of that now. There's a question mark for me over Scotland's pathway in particular. But then, you know, to flip it around and say, look, New Zealand, two examples in Wales, Blair Murray and St Plumtree, both came into international test footy for Wales pretty quickly, having been at NPC level in New Zealand, and have shown that they were capable of performing at test level. So does that mean that NPC is full of test level players, or is maybe, do we need to ask, is the talent ID in New Zealand not necessarily everything that it needs to be?
Oh, that's a big question. That's a very good question. Jade, as a New Zealander, you can jump in there.
You know what, man? I wouldn't say it's. Look, if you look in the way, looking at Ireland yesterday, they had obviously Aki Lowe and James Park. And, you know, we had the Tom Jordan that we spoke about.
Matt Hansen as well, played Super Rugby for the Brumbies.
He's from the Brumbies, from Dylan as well. I think it was from Australia. But it was about 15 players in England. Actually, shout out to coming fly for giving me the stat. But it was 15 players playing yesterday or the day before for either England, Ireland, or France that qualified, or they come from the Southern Hemisphere. So that's actually, it's one of those three teams. The starting team would be from the South, So it's actually I wouldn't say concerning stat, but an interesting stat. And there was none from Wales actually. So I think maybe you in another direction. But if you're looking at what in terms of the way New Zealand rugby is run and the way they're going at with their central contracts, and they said there's only 5 franchises, so otherwise you're going to have to play NPC rugby and not really get a central contract. I think it's only 140 or so people as players on central contracts. So there is an opportunity for guys to move. You see guys moving to Japan, see guys moving left, right, and center, and there is a lot of eyes now up north as well, with having a guy like Jody Barrett that moved now to Leinster, and still enjoying his rugby there, and a lot more guys are seeing it. They say, well, there's not actually a bad league to play in. I might be interested in this. But if you're looking at, like you said, the ties, it's easy for those New Zealand teams or New Zealand players, easier than South Africa, to join up with the likes of Wales or Wales or Scotland and England, because of they belong to the Commonwealth, So it's easy for them. They might have some grandmother or great grandmother or whatever, that's got an English passport, and they qualify immediately to play for those teams. So that's where it comes from, when they do move up north. We've seen it with Brad Shields as well. We've seen it now with what's this guy's name, Fergusberg as well, So that's where it comes. It's also the New Zealand, Australia, they have close ties with the UK. So that's also where the move does come from, and why they are eligible quick enough to play for those countries. But like you said, and you stated it, I like what the countries are doing, and they're still doing it now. Even those guys not good enough, they select the guys who's not eligible to play for another country. So that's actually smart. I think that might just be what Townsend is doing with Fergusberg, because surely, Scoop, when you're going into the internationals now in June, July, you're going to see guys going and playing for the Lions. So obviously Scotland and England won't be at full strength. So that's the chance where they would approach a guy like Fergusberg, to play for them and get a test cap and make him eligible to play for their country.
Yeah. So now we can call up Eddie Jones, right, and say, hey, Eddie, New Zealand and Australia are the academies for the UK and the British and Irish sides then.
Yeah.
Anyway, any final thoughts then, Hugh, regarding this weekend, the first round of Six Nations, and then Jade, you can also close it off as well.
No, it's good to have Test footy back. Obviously, it's a good time, and it's nice to only have 3 games to watch instead of 15 or whatever it was.
Jade, final thoughts?
Yeah, it's nice to have 3 games of suitable watching standard to watch, not just maybe 1 game, so good rugby or stuff. But I mean, I enjoy the Six Nations. I never had an issue with it. I always liked it. So I enjoy it every week, and I like the setup as well. I don't think it's the best international competition in the world, but it's a good competition to watch. But yeah, I enjoy it.
Oh, jeez. You had to throw that in there. Any questions from you guys that are listening now regarding the Six Nations or something you want to ask the panel? You can ask now when the open mic. And if not, we can close it off. You can just put your hand up if you have something to ask. I'll give it a minute or a couple of seconds, and then we'll take it from there. Okay, I guess not, gents. But yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for listening in, and thank you, Hugh. Thank you, Jade. We will put up the podcast then on Spotify and YouTube and Apple Podcast. Thanks once again for listening to the Rugby Scoop Pod. Have a wonderful Sunday, a wonderful week ahead. It's always great having these particular conversations, and next week is a big one. Before we go, I need your predictions, actually, Jade and Hugh. Wait. So next week, we'll start off with you, Jade. Italy, Wales, Saturday.
In Italy. Don't see Wales.
In Italy.
I don't see Wales in Italy.
Hugh, Italy, Wales?
Yeah, Italy are favourites.
Mess. Okay, and then after that, we've got England, France in England. Jade.
Oh, like I said earlier, France, the winners just get out to finish off chances. So I think England will be close in it, but I think there'll be 2 or 3 breakaway tries by those French winners, and then they'll pop it at the France.
Hugh, England, France?
Untamak being banned makes it difficult. But I think France have got more of the killer instinct about them at the moment.
Right. So, and then another big one that's next week Sunday. Ooh, and it's kicking off just after we finish the pod. Maybe we should record after the game on Sunday next week. Jade, Scotland, Ireland.
In Scotland.
Yep.
I'm going Scotland.
Oh, flower, Scotland.
I think that just has to be broken. 2-0, right? I think Scotland.
Yeah, Scotland needs to do something, man. Hugh, Scotland, Ireland?
I got to go Ireland for historical precedence.
Fair enough. Thanks, gents, and thanks once again for listening in. Thank you for joining this Sunday's chat, and we'll check you guys next week Sunday. We'll need to work out on the time there because that Scotland-Ireland game is a big one, actually, and actually England and France. Sorry, Hugh, Italy and Wales. All right, cheers, lads.
Cheers,
have a good week.
Cheers, bye.